Welcome to Qatar KickAround, the nightly wrap-up and discussion of the day's action in the 2022 World Cup. From the group stage to the final, our team is here, keeping you on top of the world's most watched sporting event. Brought to you by Westwood One Sports.
That is going on because not only are we doing a live podcast every day at the end of the day, but we are also attempting to live stream this on the interwebs at the same time because we're such big wigs.
We're on TV?
Well, here's the thing. I didn't want Andy. Well, let me just get through this. So we're going to podcast every day. You'll be able to find that and also the live stream if you don't want to wait for the podcast. On a variety of platforms, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. It's all out there. Go watch the show live or listen to the podcast. The easiest way for me to tell you where to find it is just go to our website, thekickaround.com. Hi, it is me, Peter, and I'm tagging along the walking encyclopedia and all-knower of all things trivia of the World Cup and the world's most interesting man, Andy Swift.
Peter, it's finally here. Match day 1. We have arrived.
Match day 1A.
Oh?
Match day 1A. I'll explain.
Right, okay.
And joining us for the first time, our third World Cup, live from London, noted football journalist Lars Severston. Greeting, Lars.
Hi, guys. How are you?
We are good. Lars, you look like you're in a lovely space somewhere in downtown or a little suburb in London somewhere.
No, again, for the benefit of our listeners and the 3 viewers, I am recording this from my office at home, which is not fit for the gaze of human eyes or indeed animal eyes. It's just not fit for anyone to look at. So I have deployed the magic of technology and given myself a background, which I believe is from Richmond. So Ted Lasso fans will recognize where I am now. They will be confused about why it's still bright. It is very much 10 in the evening and dark over here, but let's go with it.
Very good. Well, the lineup for today is we will spend a significant chunk of time previewing tomorrow's big game that's most important for us here in the United States as the Yanks will kick off against Wales at 1 p.m. We will also preview the other games tomorrow, England, Iran, and Netherlands, Senegal. But we will start with that scintillating game that opened the tournament today. The host, Qatar, facing off against Ecuador and setting records right off the bat, that host nation, being the first host nation never to play in a World Cup, and now also the first host nation not to get points from their opening game. By the way, the opening hosts were 16-0-6 in all the previous tournaments, apparently.
In their first game.
In their first game, yes. And Qatar managed to screw it up pretty bad today and looking like a beer league team while doing it, losing today to Ecuador 2-0.
Man, that was as bad a performance as I recall ever seeing a World Cup side play. That in the first half, particularly. I mean, they improved a little bit in that second half, and and a lot of people speak about they were caught in the moment and a lot of pressure. And wearing that jersey after all these years of preparation, what did Qatar spend? $200 billion to get this World Cup in place. And so the national team by default has a lot of pressure on it. So errant passes and bad trapping and bad decisions on the ball, all those are all issues that crop up when you're caught in the moment. But there were some basic soccer acumen issues too, right? I mean, little simple things that come naturally to professional soccer players, like leading your path with your first touch and using the sidelines as an extra defender and clearing the ball with purpose. In other words, not just clearing it, but clearing it with strategy. These are all little things that aren't about the moment, but rather about soccer instincts and acumen. And I think all this finally caught up to a national team that really doesn't have any experience at this level.
No, that's all true. What I'd say is this is a national team that has a little, I mean, pedigree is a strong word, but they did win the Asian Cup not that long ago. They did, take part of the CONCACAF Gold Cup and were not terrible in that competition. They played a couple of decent games when they were invited to the Copa America. So this is a team that certainly can do better than what we saw in the first half. And I think the first half was all about feeling the weight of the occasion and just freezing, because again, we saw professional footballers do things that professional footballers don't normally do, in terms of you just mentioned it, in terms of bad technical errors, simple passing errors. And that looked like a team that was a little bit caught in the headlights to me. It got better in the second half. But you know what? I'm almost more disappointed with the second half, because what I wanted, the perspective I bring to that is that you can understand on a human level, what a big deal this tournament is for the country, and all the money that's been put into it, all the controversy around it, everything that's been leading up to it. And then you come up against a really physically tough side, very energetic, a lot of running, a lot of tough guys in Ecuador. They're in your face, they're aggressive, and it goes wrong and everyone freezes a little bit. You can kind of see on a human level why that can happen in the first half. What I was even more disappointed with was after they'd had half time to settle themselves down, have a good conversation about what went wrong, maybe have a coach give them some instruction and stuff. You come out in the second half, Ecuador sit back because they don't feel like they need to do anything more, really. They're 2-0 up. And you have 45 minutes to try to do something, and there was just nothing. There was just nothing, man. And that was very disappointing.
Yeah. And you speak about the prior experience they had in the Asia Cup, and in the the Gold Cup and the Copa America as well. Actually, they played in both of those continental tournaments. But this is the first time, and they haven't had to qualify for the World Cup. This is the first time they played a game with real pressure, because I don't know if they, certainly not playing Gold Cup and Copa America. They didn't feel pressure in those tournaments. A little bit more pressure in the Asia Cup to perform well, but not that overriding pressure that the national teams have to, particularly those that are expected to win trophies. This is the first game they had that really, really mattered, that something was really, really on the line. And I think, the moment caught up to them. But I still say, looking at just eyeballs perspective and watching a lot of soccer in our lifetimes collectively, all of us and many, many people around the world too, eyeball test, those guys, it's not a national team that should be playing in a World Cup. Just simply put, they're playing in a World Cup because this nation got the rights to host the World Cup, and that's about the only reason they're there, right? I mean, clearly. It's not a nation that would qualify on its own.
So I'm not sure I'd go that far, because if you can beat Japan and South Korea in the Asian Cup, you're probably good enough to qualify out of the Asian qualifying group, right? So whether you end up qualifying for the tournament or not, that depends a little bit on how many slots your region has and stuff like this.
Yeah, true.
But I completely agree that it's one of the more inept performances that we've seen at this level. That's for sure true. And you're completely right about the pressure, not just about the general pressure of World Cup, but also about the fact I cannot reiterate what a big deal this is for the country, how much everything has been built up, and how I'm sure there is a sense there of the world being against them, because they are getting a lot of criticism that I think is entirely legitimate and well-founded. But for a small country, it probably feels like everyone's against you a little bit. And suddenly you're playing against players that are of a quality you're not used to coming up against. These guys are playing in the domestic Qatari league of the level of which I am a little bit skeptical. And then coming up, even if some of these Ecuador players aren't world stars, some of them play at a much higher level regularly. Mm-hmm. And they just came at them with an intensity and with an aggression in the first half. And, Ecuador weren't great, but they didn't have to be. They just kind of... They stopped Qatar from playing the way Qatar want to play and just mercilessly exploited them on the break. And there were a few times when you talk about the basics when Qatar lost the ball and there's just a big hole in midfield. Like everyone had run off and there was no cover for anything. I was like, oh my God, where's everyone gone? It was not a good performance by the Qataris. And in the second half, when they had every chance of trying to play themselves back into something, because it was clear that Ecuador was like, fine, we're 2-0 up, long tournament, we'll just sit back, not going to burn off too much energy for the final 45 minutes here. And they kind of invited Qatar almost to come onto them. They just couldn't create anything. That was almost more worrying to me than freezing in the first half, I have to say.
The other interesting aspects of the game, and Lars, this gets back to the fact that this has been going on or being prepped for 12 years now, and everybody was super excited about it, is the social media sharing that was going on live in the stadium as they got into the game into the second half, and it became more and more obvious that because the Qataris were playing so poorly and were down 2-0, that by the time they started the second half, the stadium was starting to empty out, and at one point there were pictures just early in the second half where it was maybe 2/3 full. Gab Marcotti tweeted out a photo, and he was saying, in all the years of me attending World Cups, I've never seen a host nation game empty out this quickly before. Yeah. And again, one of the criticisms about Qatar getting the tournament was that it wasn't a true footballing or soccer nation to begin with. They had to create all this stuff out of whole cloth. They've spent $220 billion for this World Cup, which is
with a B.
Billion with a B. Other crazy number about that is 2x all the other World Cups combined that the host nations have spent to build this thing. Crazy. And for all of that, they end up with not just a bad performance on the field, but a really terrible look, and that all of the people just kind of evaporated when it went bad.
Lars, I wonder really how many Qataris were in the stadium to watch Qatar. I mean, how many nationals were there to watch Qatar, and how many seats were taken by neutrals, because the way the ticket dynamics have worked for this World Cup, neutrals or those traveling to watch their national teams are also ending up with tickets for other games. And so there were clearly a lot of neutrals at this match. And I wonder just how many neutrals saw the opening ceremonies, one half of bad soccer, at least by one team. And then just by the second half, we're like, we got to get on to other bigger and better things, or find my closest watering hole before everybody else gets there.
I mean, I know it's a small country, but come on, this is such a huge international prestige event for Qatar. I'd be absolutely baffled if not every single ticket had gone to Qatari nationals, and that this is a real.
But there's not that many, Lars. That's the issue.
I know, but when it comes to leaving early, listen. Occasionally, people can leave early from soccer matches. It can happen. But that many people leaving that early from an opening game in a World Cup on home soil is very
You've been
strange.
waiting for 12 years before.
Even I mean, you weren't 5-0 down. You were 2-0 down against the team that had kind of stopped playing and kind of invited you to try to do something. So really that was a very strange thing. And it did sort of, I know all these vacuous statements from the FIFA bigwigs should be treated with a fair bit of contempt anyway. But some of the stuff about how this is, the World Cup, it's a big tent and everyone's welcome and everyone together and stuff, kind of undermines that statement a little bit. If everyone's in it together, except if your team is 2-0 down, in which case I'm off home. Now, I guess the thing to caveat with is reportedly the traffic was terrible. Like, the stadium is a little bit in the middle of nowhere, and the traffic getting there was really bad. So maybe they wanted to beat the traffic going home, but it's not a very good look. It really isn't.
It is the most northern stadium apparently on the map,
and it's the one that's really the farthest from city center,
which is so weird to say considering all 8 stadiums are within an area that we live in here in Texas.
This would be like in Prosper or something.
Yeah,
right?
This would be like going to Toyota Stadium to see FC Dallas and Frisco.
Hey, shifting real quick now to Ecuador, the team that won the game and that looked decent. And one thing Lars said is that in the second half, Ecuador almost invited Qatar to get back in the game. They took it off.
Ecuador hasn't allowed a goal now in 7 straight games.
Yeah, and I think, the way they play is they're very good defensively and very direct and dynamic on their counters, which is how they're going to have to play, against Holland and their match against the Netherlands. And I would just wonder if tactically they were wanting to do that a little bit to kind of get, or they just hey, let's not get in. But one thing I will say, I hope they don't, if you're Ecuadorian, later rue the day that they didn't really press hard for that third goal, because
that's a great point.
This group may come down to goal difference on who advances.
It's a very good point. It's entirely possible that Qatar ends up with 0 points here. In fact, based on that performance, I'd say it's pretty likely. And if both Senegal and Ecuador lose to the Dutch and they draw against each other, then who put the most goal past Qatar is what's going to divide them, right?
It is. Now I want to pat ourselves on the back because we didn't start by talking on the VAR. Are we proud of that?
We don't have to. I mean, it was it wasn't a talking point. We'll get to it, but
also it is what it is at this point.
Well,
right?
okay, but we have. I think the oddity of it is the fact that it happened so early in the match, like 3 minutes into the game, and it was so poorly handled from the operational kind of communicating to the fan base what's going on, and all of the stuff that they promised us. They never deliver. They
speed of decision, basically.
Speed of decision, the animation that is supposed to show you very clearly how the decision was made by the computer and the human in tandem. All of that stuff. I mean, they finally showed us. They finally showed us a still shot graphic, but that took almost 5 minutes. And because it was such a weird offside call to begin with, the position of the player and all of that stuff, and because it's Qatar and all the other things that we've been talking about, the fact that it happened so early in the game really lent itself to all of the shenanigans and shadiness and all of that stuff that we've been worried about for some
everybody
time.
was already shouting.
Yeah, definitely did.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm not going to, very often with these decisions, I get all high and mighty and I say, learn the laws of the game, doofus. But that's the voice I have. But in this case, in fairness, this was a strange situation, and it took me quite a few looks at it before I understood what it actually had been. But it is one of those, as the half went on, images were gradually, circulated, which showed that, it was an offside. It is a VAR full house, though, in the sense that it's technically correct, but the communication wasn't good. And thirdly, it's an application of the law that I think a majority of fans will feel that that's not what an offside should be. That's not what the law is for. But
it is what is in place, though, right?
Exactly right. By the letter of the law, it was offside. I just wish it had been faster and explained a little bit better.
Man, I hate this so much. And I know here on American television, Lars, Alexi Lawless and Clint Dempsey were set up to debate this in the halftime. And Clint was talking about tie goes to the runner. That's how I'd like to see it. And Alexi came back with, you can't be a little bit pregnant.
Yeah.
And Dempsey shot him a glare that would have put burned holes through most anything.
True.
Okay.
This idea of a tie,
hold on, Lars, hold on. You and I both know that the offside law, from its origins to up until 2 years ago, was never, ever intended for this binary on-off switch-like application. And what's wrong with it is that we've introduced this technology that allows us to decide somebody's kneecap is offside, which gives them, by the way, 0 attacking advantage. We need to rewrite the entire law. And can we just get this out of the way before we move on to the... Because you guys know that this tournament is now likely to have a bunch of goals wiped off because of the application of this technology that gave a person 0 attacking advantage.
But even pre-VAR, every single game had, or most games certainly will have had, attacking moves stopped by an offside call, which would have been extremely tight. That is in the nature of the game. The difference is before, the poor linesman had to basically guess or go by gut instinct. I mean, linesmen are unbelievably skilled at their jobs. Like, for years and years and years, we were asking these poor guys to look 2 places at the same time whilst running. Like, how they get so many decisions right is unfathomable to me. They're so competent, right? But there will be decisions that are so close where they essentially have to go by gut instinct, right? And for some reason, we were happier with this than having technology that shows us what actually happened.
We could have a whole podcast about this. So.
Well, we've talked about it. And I'm a tech guy. I love technology. I just don't like chocolate in my peanut butter. I don't like peanut butter, but whatever.
That's actually a pretty good combination. That's a really bad. Like,
no,
what you don't like is what ice cream in your champagne, or like something. I mean, that's Got to come up with better examples. Plenty of people like chocolate with their peanut butter. Come on.
Or cotton candy and whatever that Thai soup you were eating before we went live was.
Cotton candy in my tum yum. That'd be awful.
None of that. Come on, man.
You're making Andy unwell.
Okay,
No.
so here's my question.
I want no ice cream on my steak.
Is there a chance that we don't really know much about Ecuador at all out of this, just simply because they essentially played a beer league, Sunday league team?
I think so. I think we saw glimpses of what they can bring. I mean, you saw some of the dynamic direct play that they'll bring to the table against Holland and Senegal, but we still don't know if they're better than.
Because Enner Valencia was never this great for Everton or
that header was something else.
Oh, that header was very nice. Or West Ham.
We should say that. Yeah, I mean, so Enner Valencia has been in tremendous form for his club team. I mean, I neglected to bring this up in our preview pods. I apologize. I should have called this one. Enner Valencia scored 13 goals and 11 starts for Fenerbahce in Turkey this year. Now, the Turkish league, not the hardest one in the world, but I mean, clearly he's on form and very unlucky not to have a hat trick, really, with that tight offside call. And my word, what a header that was.
So maybe the U.S. needs a center forward, a 9 that is playing in Turkey and banging some goals.
Well, that would be great, wouldn't it? Yeah, that would be
maybe
really,
they
really
have
cool.
that now.
All right. So we start off the 2022 World Cup in Qatar with the host losing their opening game for the first time in the history of the World Cup. Unbelievable. And I'm sure there is certainly a fair share of people delighted by that piece of information because it is the Qatarians, after all, and all the stuff that has gone on. But, man, I think you guys are right. And all of the up-close shots of all those guys on that team, they all looked so stressed out and so frustrated. And
the coach, shots of the coach.
Oh, yeah.
Bury me.
Yes, it was pretty crazy. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll get into why I called this Match Day 1A, because tomorrow will be Match Day 1B, and we'll spend the next 20 minutes or so breaking down and previewing the big one, USA versus Wales, next. All right, welcome back to part 2 of Match Day 1A of the Qatar KickAround wrap-up show. We are all good to go. Lars is playing with his virtual reality background because we are also live streaming these once again. So if you want, you'll be able, if you don't want to wait for the podcast, you can watch us live record these. And in theory, the live stream should be on our website, but for some reason on day number 1, that turned into a glitch. But there are links to the live stream on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter. I'm even doing it on my stupid old-fashioned Facebook page. So let's do all of that. All right, tomorrow is when we really get into this. That will be, as I have decided to call it, Match Day 1B, because it essentially is the rest of Group A and the beginning of Group B. Remember, the game today was originally scheduled to be played tomorrow, but then Qatar said, no, wait, you got to treat us special like you do all the other host nations. That's my best Qatari impersonation, Lars. Do you like that?
I mean,
Okay.
it's close to my learn the laws doofus voice in terms of
I
voices.
like it.
We should do many voices throughout the tournament. I think that's the way
I
to go.
would love as many Lars voices as we can get. You just roll them out. Character voices, whatever you can do. Impersonations.
Oh my God, no! We'll get in
You
so
don't
much
do
trouble.
that. The other bonus of watching the live stream is that you get to see the kick-ass wall chart that I got off of Amazon, which was recommended to me by a good listener, Jonesy, who brought his son to our showing, Lars, of Escape to Victory, or Victory as we call it here.
Good life decision, Jones.
Yeah,
for
brought
you
his
and your son.
He
Excellent.
brought his 8-year-old kid.
Yes.
Although I felt bad for the 8-year-old kid because the 8-year-old kid was wearing a German national team shirt. So I think there was going to be some confusion there that he was going to have to teach his kid the difference between
bit of history you need to maybe explain in a very
yes,
delicate manner.
his Germany and the Germany being on display in the movie. But he told me he had bought his kid this wall chart that he could write with a marker and track all the games, and it had all the information, and he sent me the link, and so here we are. The wall chart behind me, I've posted on the wall so everybody can enjoy that along with it. All right. Tomorrow, 1 p.m. on here in the United States, Big Boy Fox, Channel 4 here in Dallas. It is, for the first time in 8 long years, the United States men's national team is back in the World Cup, facing off against a team that hasn't been in the World Cup about 7 times as long in Wales. The last time the Welsh were in the World Cup was, I think, even before you and I were alive, right?
1958.
Yes.
Their only
10
other
years
appearance.
before I was even thought of in my parents' eye. So anyway, the Welsh and the United States come into this tournament. Andy and I talked about this on our radio show the other day, Lars, and I'm interested in your perspective about this weird, odd fact about the United States. So I've been tracking this for a while. So in the entirety of Greg Berhalter's term as manager of the national team, the U.S. men's national team, do you realize that if you consider Giovanni Reyna, Reyna, Pulisic, Adams, Musa, and McKennie as your 5 best players on the roster, those guys have never played together on a soccer field, ever.
Interesting.
Is that not weird?
So that's mostly to do with injuries, right? But also
there was a little bit of McKennie tied to the. Well, actually, I think Gio was still hurt, but McKennie had that weird suspension during qualifiers because he had his girlfriend come over for some fun time when he wasn't supposed to.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let he who has not, cast the first stone. But there is something there about how that group, say, if you want Pulisic, Gio, Aronson, McKennie, Adams, and Musa, if you want them all into the same team, not sure how that fits really. I mean, there is a challenge there.
That is a good point. Now, what I would ask, and I don't know if you have those stats, is Adams, McKennie.
It's 5 of them. It's
and Musa. No, but those 3, the midfield core.
Yeah.
Have they played together much? Or
Yes.
But it's rare still.
It's when you. I mean, Gio's the one that largely screws up the list of 5, and you can put all 5 of those on the field at the same time. You've got Gio on the right, Pulisic on the left, and the 3 guys in the middle. That is in many people's mind, that is minus the starting 9. Those are the 5 guys you want on the field. Aronson has changed that narrative somewhat recently, and so. That's how you do those 5 guys, Lars. That's how that is supposed to be happening, at least in theory.
And there's a lot of stuff to get into to preview this match, but I've seen a few suggestions that Aronson might not start tomorrow, which just from the perspective of someone who covers the Premier League very closely seems mad because he's been very good.
I think the reason rotation is important, right, in World Cups and tournaments like these, and so you have to rotate your players. And if you're going to pick a game where Aronson starts, you probably pick England because of what he does on the field. Think about Wales. Wales is going to defend with 5 and then counter on you. So they're going to have to take the game to Wales. They're going to have to break down that defense. I don't know if that's Aronson's strength. I mean, he's good at that, but I mean, he's the pest. So you want to put him in a situation where the other team has a lot of possession and he can dispossess and kind of pressure you're playing out of the back. Who's more likely to play out of the back in a methodical way? That's England. It's not Wales. That's what my theory is. So that's why I don't think Aronson will start tomorrow, but I think there's a good chance he starts against England.
Yeah, I see your logic, and I suppose Aaronson's also a good guy to have coming off the bench if you need him to liven up things, right? Because he can inject some real energy and urgency into things.
It is. There's a lot of talk going on in soccer Twitter with the locals, with the American soccer media trying to make predictions about what's going to happen with the starting 11 tomorrow. Andy makes a great point about, hey, you can't just plan for this game. You got to think about games 2 and 3 as well. There also are a few questions about people's health situation, mostly just the fact that they haven't played a lot lately. It starts with Weston McKennie, who hasn't been playing a lot for Juventus. He's been coming off an injury. He says he's healthy and ready to go, but does he have 90 minutes in him? Subbing him out at some point can change some things tactically. The other one is Serginho Dest, who is clearly a guy that has been playing off and on for Milan after getting sold from Barcelona. He hasn't played a lot. I saw one of the guys at The Athletic. He is putting out the claim that he thinks Shaq Moore starts on the right tomorrow. And the reason for that is interesting because if you're going to work under the premise that you've got Zimmerman and maybe Tim Ream, who's probably the guy that's in the best form in terms of center backs going right now. Neither one of those guys are speedsters. Shaq helps with that a little bit along with Robinson in terms of pace because he's clearly the fastest option and he's the most defensive-minded. In that position. So that would be, don't be surprised if you don't see Dest start tomorrow, although that'll break a lot of hearts and set the anti-Berhalter group on a fire right off the bat. So,
and I would certainly say, following on from Andy's logic earlier, in that you're kind of picking the team for the opposition. One of the things that would worry you playing against Wales is speed down the flanks, right? With some Dan James or Wilson, and their game plan, I assume, will be trying to counter fast down the flanks. And Serginho Dest is a very attack-minded young gentleman and maybe an area that could possibly be exploited behind him. So there's some tactical sense to that, I think.
All right, the other piece of news that came out this afternoon that is very important to this game and a blow to Wales and a boost for the United States is that Joe Allen, their holding mid, is not going to be available. At least they're saying it's unlikely that he'll be able to play. You may remember Joe Allen from his days at Liverpool, but he is critical to the Welsh because they don't have anybody equitable to play that. But Ampadu can come in there, but he's younger and they've been using him as a center back. So by moving Ampadu to that, you're fixing one problem and creating two.
But Lars, was Joe Allen, I mean, they didn't know whether he was finally going to get to be 100%, and I guess now we're just confirming that basically, right? So he was always a little bit in doubt.
Yeah, it was more a case they were hoping they were going to get him ready. I've also seen one suggestion that Joe Morrell of Bournemouth could come in which case you're introducing a guy who plays in the third tier in English football. So, it's not world-class players you're bringing in. When we're talking about Wales, they are one of these international teams where you always have to bear in mind that players consistently raise themselves from what they do on their club teams to what they do for the Welsh national team. This is very often not true in soccer. It tends to be the other way around. But the Welsh have some sort of strange magic around their team that a lot of sort of random guys who are not considered very good suddenly pull on the Welsh shirt and do crazy things that you don't expect them to. So there might be some names on this team sheet that you're not expecting a lot from, but complacency is not advised. Moving Ampadu into midfield is definitely one option, but it certainly, this is something that weakens them, not having Joe Allen there.
The other obvious X factor in this game for the Welsh is Gareth Bale, and I thought the comments by his LAFC teammate Kellen Acosta this week were very interesting. I don't know if you guys saw these, but Kellen was talking about how he enjoyed playing with Gareth in LA. And he figured that of anybody on the team, he had the best perspective. And he was suggesting we need to get into kicking him right off the bat. I mean, Kellen was very honest about it. And I'm interested in your thoughts about this, Lars, because you've probably seen Bale play in person more than an Andy and I times 10. I would believe that. I can see that Bale's the kind of guy that if you just kick him a few times or a lot and you give him a lot of physical play, he can be turned down and reduced in a game.
Yeah, so he had a pretty bad injury at a very early stage of his career, like going all the way back to sort of 2007, 2008. He missed like more than half a season, if I recall correctly, with injury. And there has been a sense, I mean, he's a guy who's always throughout his career known that his physicality is a big part of his power, his ability to run, his ability to jump. And he's always been someone who's a little bit worried about getting injured again, which I think is a normal psychological thing for footballers to have. But it's certainly not untrue that he is someone who prefers not to get kicked. I think most people do, but he knows he has a body that can be a little bit brittle. But it's also the key to his strengths are very much physical, some of them. So it's not a bad suggestion, put it that way. It's not a bad suggestion. But he is also such a strange beast at this point of his career, because you see him for LAFC, and you made this remark after the MLS Cup. He does almost nothing. But then comes the moments when the ball appears near him in the box and he suddenly springs to life and he can time a leap and he can turn up with the finish. I think he's someone who knows. I mean, he's 33, if I'm not mistaken now, but he's had his share of injuries, and I think he's an old 33 in footballing terms. So I think he keeps his powder dry quite often, as they say over here in games, and he's very, very careful about when he involves you. You're not going to see him make any sort of massive defensive runs, I don't think, but he does have. I believe clutch is a phrase in your American sports parlance, gentlemen, and there's a bit of that to Gareth Bale. He does have an ability to not become worse when the stakes are high, but actually find new levels when the stakes are high.
Yeah, he's to be feared. He's the set piece. Bale is something that I think is something to watch tomorrow. My question for you, Lars, regarding Bale is, so he's played about 60 to 65% of the minutes for Wales that they've played over the last several games. Does he start at this point? Does he come in as a strategic sub? How are they going to use Wales, you think?
I think they start him because I think they know this is a very, very important game in the group. I think it stands to reason. Like, if you guys win tomorrow, then it's going to be very hard for Wales. So I think this is...
Yeah, a loser tomorrow for either. If there's a loser tomorrow, they're in bad shape then moving forward.
I think they know that, and I think the thing about someone like Bale, he's 33. You start him, and then you trust him to know his own body at this point. There's no one who knows more about Gareth Bale's body at this point than Gareth Bale, right? So yes, I suspect they start him, and then they just accept that he's not going to run around and press you guys all day. He's going to have to manage his physique a little bit, and then you trust him to come up with the goods, be it a free kick, be it a shooting chance from 30 yards or a header in the box, or one of those things that we know Bale can do.
The thing about Bale that I'm always confused by is the issue with Bale is it a fitness thing or is it a desire thing? Because there's a part of me that wouldn't be surprised to find out that because it's the World Cup, Bale shows up and he plays 90 minutes, 3 straight games, because he doesn't look like a guy that's unfit. And I can't remember where somebody made the point. I don't remember where I read or heard this, but somebody pointed out that after Bale scored that header to tie the game late in the MLS Cup, he literally sprinted the diagonal length of the entire pitch to go celebrate with his other teammates. Sprinted across the field. Like in that.
Who said? No, I think he sprinted to the touchdown.
No, he literally ran from one corner to the other, sprinted the other way. I went back and watched it afterwards. Now, maybe he started there and then went down, but there was like a point in time where people were surprised that Gareth Bale actually sprinted the length of the field, because they just don't see that. And I do wonder if we're just going to see superhero Gareth Bale over the course of the next 2 weeks.
So I would say here we bump into a semantic issue, which is when we say fitness, us guys in the media, we tend to use that as a catch-all phrase for all kinds of physical things.
Sure.
Whereas I think with Bale, we need to separate a few things. In terms of being in good shape, not carrying weight, being sharp physically, that's never been an issue with him. Like, the guy looks after himself. With him, the problem is he picks up injuries really quickly. And that's why he kind of has to protect himself a little bit. And in terms of desire, I think if you ask people at Madrid, they might say that there was a feeling that he was rarely prepared to sacrifice himself for the club the way they would perhaps hope. I'm sure he would contest that. I mean, I should put that viewpoint across. But what we certainly see is that when it comes to playing for Wales, he does tend to find reserves of energy and capability physically that people at his club team were not aware that he had. And so he's certainly one of those guys when it comes to Wales games, and this is probably his last dance, right? So he's going to push himself and do as much as he can for these games.
All right. So I think we can predict that the game tomorrow? What?
Well, I think there's one more player, as we tell people, players to watch on the other team, that we have to talk about, and that's Kiefer Moore.
That's exactly where I was going.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is I don't think I am Nostradamus in predicting this game likely will come down to set pieces, and especially for Wales, because they've got Bale that can hit a free kick, and now they've also got a 6'5" forward who's doing well in the Premier League currently, and has played at all different levels in Kiefer Moore, and likely is another guy that can give the Americans a lot of trouble tomorrow.
Yeah, and I saw I saw a piece by a former Welsh national team player named Danny Gabidon, who had a long career in England with Cardiff and West Ham and other clubs, who suggested that could be a route for Wales, not just on set pieces, but to beat the press for the US. You know, you guys are going to kind of come at them, going to try to press them high, use all the energetic young legs. But here's the thing about pressing. You just kick the ball over them, like in the general direction of this giant man up front. And if he can either win the first ball or even trap it, then you've kind of moved past the lines there, right? So that's something I suspect Wales will try to do. I think they'll hope to be canny and not overplay at the back, knowing that the US are going to try to pressure them and instead try to play over you guys, basically.
And that really is the quandary for Berhalter, because his fullbacks are so critical. You know, with Anthony Robinson bombing forward, trying to get up on the left and do damage from there, Dest becomes, this is why the Dest thing is such a question, because for all of his skill and everything going on, you can see a scenario very easily where the United States gets caught forward and they have, Zimmerman, who's not very fast, maybe Long, who's coming off, right?
Yeah, and this is where the center back pairing
And this is the center back pairing issue. And if you've got Dest, also trying to do stuff, and then you've got Daniel James, who's probably one of the fastest guys in the tournament, and I can't even think who would be the other person on the other side with James. Well, I guess it's going to be Bale.
It'll be Bale, yeah, probably.
Yeah, so it'll be obviously it'll be Bale. That's not a scenario you want to see Walker Zimmerman, Tim Ream, or Aaron Long stuck in, and that's why I think there is an ongoing conversation about who he sticks out there. But here's the other problem. If the United States is going to be tasked with breaking down the great defensive Welsh moat, you may need somebody like Dest to help you do that.
Yeah.
And you're almost like pick your poison.
Right. Yeah.
Completely agree. It's a really, no question about it. You guys have got a better team on paper in terms of the individual players, where they play, all of this. But the tactical matchup here is really fascinating. And the thing with the pressing, it reminds me, this is a little bit self-indulgent, but like one of the first time I did television punditry in my home country of Norway was for the Europa League final 2012. And it was Bielsa's Athletic Bilbao versus Diego Simeone's Atletico Madrid. And I sort of breathless with youthful enthusiasm told the Norwegians all about, the pressing ways of Bielsa before the game. And then at halftime, they were trailing because basically Simeone just played over it. It was like, fine, Marcelo, you want to press high. That's all good. We got Falcao up front. We're going to boot him to him all day. And that worked really well for
funny,
Simeone
10 years later, those two managers, nothing's changed.
Exactly right.
Good point.
It's 100% the same thing. And that's why I listen through work. I had nothing against the Wales. I've got Welsh friends, but through working with you guys, I do kind of hope the US do well. So I do the thing I worry for you tomorrow is really the very agricultural big long hoofs to Kiefer Moore. That is a concern for me.
All right, fair enough. Now I do want to throw out this weird lineup, because I've seen some other people suggest this for the United States, because one of the great mysteries about what Berhalter is going to do is for a number 9, and I think the default is that Ferreira's going to start in that position. He's got Josh Sargent as an option. I think Matt Doyle predicted Sargent would start, and Haji Wright. But what if you were to throw out a front 3 of Gio, Aronson, and Pulisic, and take that kind of whoever you've trying to choose as a 9 out of the equation and go with the concept of putting your best players on the field?
But you're taking Weah out, right?
Well, or put Weah in instead of Aronson.
Yeah,
whatever.
I would say that is I think there's something to be said about those front 3, and it might be something Berhalter tries.
I'm going to
You think he's going to go with Ferreira? Is that your gut?
I don't know, but I'm thinking as a coach, if I'm trying to put my best players in the current best form on the field, Aronson is one of those guys.
Is Wales a team that you need a 9 that holds the ball well, doesn't necessarily play as the 0.9? Because you're breaking down a defense here. You're not playing into the box, right?
So this is why I don't think Ferreira starts in this game, is because he's not a guy you serve balls into for crosses and so forth, as you probably would with Haji and or Sargent, because of their size. Right. And it's going to be so. I think if he's going to do that, he's going to put one of those guys in instead to start. But it just makes you wonder if you're going to have to do some other things if getting your best 11 on the field, at least in terms of how you feel about those guys.
It's not necessarily the best 11. It's the best 11, the best combination of 11 that works against that team.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And you have 3 games to worry about, to rehash that point. And it's all this is part of the puzzle. Tomorrow's just part of the puzzle about getting through this group. But you do need a result. You need at least a tie. You can't lose the game tomorrow. And Wales is saying the same thing, by the way.
For sure. And that was one of the questions I was asking you in our group chat is, what is the percentage of teams that get out of the group after losing their first game?
So it's low. It's low, but it happens. Every World Cup, typically 1, maybe 2 teams that lose their first game advance, but almost always it's against the team that ends up winning the group or also advancing with you. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like if they play Netherlands first and lose, there's still a good chance they advance.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Spain is a great, because Spain went on to win the World Cup after losing their first game when they were the host, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So
when they were the host, well, no,
were they the host in
2010? No, that was South Africa.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yes. Sorry, but they lost their first game.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, that wouldn't have made sense. Yeah, they lost their first game and went on not just to get out of the group, but to win the entire tournament.
Correct.
And we'll talk about this a little bit. We've posted all of our predictions on the website, thekickaround.com. We ended up working with the FOTMob application, which has a really nice little radio wheel that they end up creating with all of your predictions for the knockout stage. And so we've posted all of our predictions there, so you can hold us to those later on. All right, so real quick, Andy, do you have a prediction for Wales-USA tomorrow?
I think I agree with you. I think it's a 1-1 draw.
That's what I'm predicting, and that's what I'm sticking to. Lars, you gonna break this?
I think you guys can do it. I think I'm going to go 2-1.
Are you just being polite, Norwegian polite? Do you really believe that in your heart of hearts?
I was also, because you just mentioned the FOTMob predictor we did, and I did have you guys progress. So a win would be a good sort of step towards that. And I just, as much as I like and admire Wales, and I love the story and the fact that they bring players who are normally not that good and then they play well and all that, I just think you guys are a better football team, and I think you can get it done.
Yeah, you know what concerns me, Lars, is the first 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, that's what concerns me, and that's where I think Wales on a counter, our center back pairing,
piece, a corner,
something. The moment is getting to these guys that are young, good, but first World Cup.
Yeah,
that's my fear.
Well, so experience in a World Cup is even Steven between the two.
But Lars brought up the Euros, which is not quite World Cup, but it's almost World Cup, right? And maybe that calms them a little bit more than our guys. I don't know, but there's something about, I've said it before in other shows, stepping on that field and hearing the anthem for the first time in a World Cup, and
there are more players who have been to a big tournament, I suppose, is the way you'd put it.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. In my head, the way that I've envisioned this playing out is the U.S. giving up a goal relatively early in the game, probably on a set piece, and then having to scramble to score the tying goal.
But they do.
And we get a great moment.
James running counterattacks at you. I mean, that's not ideal.
Yeah, that's I just have that all played out in my head, and it won't surprise me in the least.
Or they go down 1-0, and then as they're pressing for that tying goal,
they give up a second
one. No, come on. Go USA. Lars, 2-1 sounds like a good score.
I just think not. I know I'm contradicting. If they're listeners, if you've been across all our preview pods, I kept saying you need a strong defense and good finishers to do well in a tournament. I'm going to completely contradict that and say, your midfield is tremendous. Your midfield is great. I really like the look of your midfield, and their midfield is like old Aaron Ramsey plus question mark. So, I mean, I just think you should be able to beat them from that.
Right, but I don't know if this game is won or lost in the midfield. It's won or lost in other areas, I think.
Yeah.
This is a great starting point for the game. I can't wait to discuss it afterwards when we know what had happened.
Now my tummy's all nervous and everything. I've already got that tense feeling. Okay, we'll take our next break, and when we come back, we'll preview the rest of the games happening on Monday, England and Iran, Senegal, Netherlands, and we will review our predictions and our brackets before we end it. We'll do that here next.
We don't have to drill too deep, right?
Break is over. We're into part 3 of our debut Qatar KickAround wrap-up show, Day 1A. And for this, we will continue to discuss Match Day 1B, which is comprised of 3 games, which means for the very first full day, we don't have to get up at 4 a.m. local time. That was the other thing. I meant to mention this in the last segment. It dawned on me while I was watching the game, the U.S. is playing all 3 of their games at 10 p.m. Doha time.
Yeah, that's a really good thing, I think.
Is that a good thing?
Well,
Yeah,
for climate, right?
Yes.
For temperature.
So I noted
that's definitely the time of day you want to play football in Doha.
Okay, well, the reason why, and I don't mean to keep going on about the U.S. game, there was a bunch of social media being shared about how Wales had to postpone their practice because it was too hot. It was 86 degrees, which in the word searing was used in the description of the day, which seems ridiculous to us Texans. But I did wonder, would it be an advantage to the United States if they were playing when the temperature was a little warmer? Because the game today at 10, which started at 10 our time, whatever, that's an earlier time in Doha, was like 74 degrees.
Yeah, I would think warmer temperatures advantage U.S. over England and Wales, not necessarily Iran.
Right.
But
yeah. But it's going to be nice and temperate on all 3 games because if it was 74 and the early evening, by the time you get to 10 p.m. Doha time, it may be 70 degrees.
Right. Yeah. Dry desert weather.
Very
cools down at night.
Very, very English temperatures.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I am kind of played down the heat when people have been talking about it because it's not the sort of weather disaster people in Europe might think when they hear it's being played in the desert in Qatar. But it is going to be warm. It is going to be hot in the afternoon.
Right.
It's just not going to be a lot worse than it would have been in a European summer or an American summer, or it will be in some of the games in America, I'm sure.
Yeah, tonight's game started at 7. Today's game started at 7 p.m. Doha time. So that was
so England will play at 7 Central. What time is that in Doha?
So that is the 4 p.m. game.
Okay,
Doha
so that's probably peak heat, right? Late afternoon.
Sure,
and probably advantage Iran a little bit, even though they're a continental climate, Iran a little bit.
All right, let's talk about that.
I suspect that, we can get into it. I suspect it favors Iran for geographical reasons, but also for tactical reasons.
Okay, well, let's kick off our preview of England-Iran with that tasty hint or morsel there. Lars, please continue with your thread.
Well, because, Carlos Queiroz is the Grinch of international football, right? The coach of Iran. He's back after having spent many years there before. and then he left, spent some time with Egypt, and he is someone he sets his teams up to defend. He knows what the assignment is. The assignment is to go out there and be competitive. He knows the players he has, the players he doesn't have. He had this wild quote in the build-up about how you're trying to be competing at the World Cup with Iran is like trying to compete with the space shuttle with the 737, which I would contest. The 737 is a much more practical machine in many ways, but I think we get his point. And when Iran play against England, what they want to do is they want to slow the game down. They want to stifle everything. They want to stop England from playing football. I wouldn't be surprised to see time wasting like in the first half. Really, it's going to be that kind of an occasion from Iran. And I should stress, I make no moral judgment here at all. I mean, you're at the World Cup. Your job is to get a result, and I think that's the best way to go about it if you're Iran and you're facing England. But I suspect that is going to be the mood they're in and the mode they're in. And a bit of heat, a bit more heat than the English are used to, will probably help you if that is your ambition.
Yeah, and continental bias. We've seen it in World Cup history, and Iran is playing in the Asian continent. Not only that, Asian continent is big. They're playing very close to home, just across the Gulf, in comfortable surroundings. And the first World Cup played in the Middle East. So all that advantage Iran. But England is still England. They have quality on the field. They have the depth. And they have a lot of experience. They've played, this is their third straight World Cup. But they're an old team. And England, when we're talking about youth and experience and the balance between the two and how World Cup champions need to have that balance, England is averaging, I think they're at 26 and a half years old, their average age, which is like as ideal as you can be for a World Cup winning team. I think the average age of World Cup champions is 26. Even it might even be 26 and a half, and that's exactly where England is. They have a perfect balance. They're experienced in the World Cup also. They've done well in the last few tournaments. They've gone far in the Euros and in the last World Cup. And this generation is poised to peak in this World Cup. So ultimately, I think England is the team to beat in this group, as we all know.
Oh, for sure.
I just don't think the one thing Iran has going for their favor also is that it's England's first game in the tournament, right? And this is where I think you have a big...
Well, so there's two things that I want to bring up. And one is the stereotype of England just getting in their own head. The pressure of these players with the English media and the English fan base. My entire life has been spent marveling at the English ability to be inept in tournament play with the incredible roster. I mean, most everybody on the English roster would start for almost every other team in the tournament in many ways. Not everybody, but so many national teams. Yeah, so many national teams would kill to have players that are on the bench for England, right? And yet they can't just seem to screw it together. And the second part is, and Andy, maybe you can squash this, England haven't won a game in a while. I think they haven't won a game in their last 6.
Just in the run of play in the recent times, right?
Well, through Nations League play and some other tournament, non-tournament play. They just haven't been playing well of late. And so how much does that tend to carry over into World Cups?
Yeah, I do agree with you that they've had the mental English flop issues. It's part of the reasons they've never done well until very recently in PK shootouts. But Southgate has taken that issue, and I think he's approached this squad and the roster development and tactical approach to the games. With all that in mind, he's very pragmatic. He has a 9 that can score goals and is one of the most talented 9s in the world that England hasn't had in a long time. I mean, a really good 9 like Kane. I mean, those are important in World Cups. Defense is very important, and a good 9 really goes a long way, and England has that with Kane. So I just think this England squad is a little bit different than history has shown England to be. 66 being the exception.
Sure.
Yeah. But is it enough to win the tournament? I don't know. I just think it's enough to get out of this group comfortably.
I completely agree with this. And when we're talking about the mentality issue of the past, I think Gary Neville actually gave a good little glimpse of why that kept happening, because he wrote in a column many years ago before he became a celebrated television pundit that he remembers playing for England. And if they conceded the first goal, they would be thinking about what the newspapers are going to write about them the next day. on the field while the game was going on. This is where their heads would be at, right? And this is a solid pro, Gary Neville's mentality was good. Like, he won a ton of things for his club team, but playing for England, there was this anxiety, about being just slaughtered by the press and the people. And that's something that really got in their heads when they were playing these championships. I think Southgate has managed to weed that out to a huge extent. Gareth Southgate has his critics, and there are things you can flag up that he's not done well. But I think he has been successful in creating an atmosphere in that camp where they're not afraid anymore. And I think that is a triumph in and of itself. I think it's why they went to a semi-final last World Cup. I think it's why they got to a final of the last Euros. Now, there are conversations you can have about his in-game management, both when they lost the semis against Croatia and when they lost the final against Italy. They were initially in the lead, and then those games turned, and Southgate didn't do anything to change the development. So his in-game management of the group has been criticized. But I think in terms of setting a right tone and helping these players get out of their own way, basically, and just try to be themselves a little bit more for the national team, he's done a really good job at that, and he deserves praise for that.
When I see a starting back three of Eric Dyer, Mr. Stones, and Harry Maguire, that just...
Do you reach for the liquor cabinet?
Well, it's like that. The odds of somebody having a boneheaded mistake, it just is now amplified a lot.
Now, as looking at tomorrow's game, as we preview tomorrow's game, I don't know if it's as big an issue against Iran, who defends well and is not going to have a lot of opportunity going forward. So I think tomorrow is, can they break down Iran and squeeze out a 1-0 win and move on to game 2? I think that's, just get the result. England, get the result. That's what they want to do, and then move on to game 2.
You keep looking behind you. I was worried that
the dog has broken into the recording studio.
Oh, okay, no worries.
Hopefully that doesn't interfere with anything. The dog has. I think I haven't fed her dinner yet. I think that's the problem. But before tomorrow, with regards to England, I suspect, and this is something we've seen Mr. Southgate do before, that he will approach each group game in a different manner. He'll have a plan for it. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw England revert to a back four tomorrow.
Really?
I think they know they're probably going to dominate possession in this game. And they know Iran are probably going to sit deep. And so I think the temptation to go to more of a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1, whichever shape you want in the midfield, and just introduce one more attacking midfielder there.
Could that be Mount?
Yeah, so with the typical 3-4-3 that England play, you have Kane up front. Sterling almost always plays if he's fit next to him. You have a midfield of Rice and Bellingham, and you have the wing backs, and it only leaves one spot for Saka, Mount, Grealish, Foden. Like, you have a lot of good players fighting it out over that one spot, right?
What a toolbox.
And I think the temptation will be to switch to more of a 4-3-3 and probably introduce Mount into midfield, I would imagine. And then there's an issue of who plays next to Sterling, either side of Kane, whether that's Foden or Saka. That'll be interesting to see. Saka made a really big impact when he came on against Germany in the last friendly they played. I suspect that's something that Mr. Southgate will bear in mind. So those are some things to have in the back of our heads before this game. But it does become about getting the first goal. Like, I've flagged this up as a potential banana skin. But listen, man for man, England are a much better team than Iran. Like, don't get me wrong. But if Iran can keep a clean sheet, the longer it goes on, the more that nervousness might start setting in again. But I do think if England can just get an early goal off of someone's hip or a set piece or something like this, then it should be fine.
All right, you got a prediction for this one, Lars?
Oh dear.
You weaseled out of an actual score in the U.S.-Wales game.
No, I said 2-1.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you just said U.S. was going to win. Okay, apologies.
Time to think about this one.
I'll start.
Okay, Andy, you go.
England 1-0.
1-0. Okay.
You see, Andy's done it there, but I think it'll be 1-0. I think.
All right, I'm going to go.
And a bad game. I think this will not be.
Yeah, it's not necessarily going to be pretty.
I'm
agree, Lars.
expecting a pretty dreadful game, but England to get it over the line.
All right.
I agree.
I'm going to go 2-0. Ingerland. And then the other game at 10 a.m. locally here in the United States is Senegal versus the Netherlands, which after watching the game today between Ecuador and Qatar takes on a whole new kind of weird vibe because you're not as curious. You're not working in the fog of war of trying to figure out what the mystery host team looks like. And now that you know that, maybe you're a little less concerned. The big news in this game, obviously, is that Sadio Mane is no longer available. I think they've officially said he's just out for the tournament, right?
Yeah, he's had an
Okay.
operation. He's completely out.
So that changes. I mean, Senegal is clearly a very good team, but they've so relied on Mane to do scoring duty. I don't know, Lars, if you have a good sense as to how they replace that or if they even can go about doing it.
Well, I would expect to see Crepin Diatta come in, him and Ismail Assar either side of Boulaye Dia. In terms of scoring duties, Boulaye Dia takes on an extra importance. He's a former Villarreal player of La Liga, now at Salernitana in Serie A, and has a decent scoring record there, but it's nowhere near Sadio Mane, of course. And listen, all else being equal, I liked Senegal as an outsider because they got a good goalkeeper, solid center halves, and a very industrious midfield, plus Sadio Mane up front. That, for me, always spelled like a good recipe for an underdog that could do well. But without Sadio Mane, it takes away so much of their scoring power. Intriguingly, though, Memphis Depay is not expected to make it for the Dutch. And that reduces them quite a lot going forward as well. I mean, under Louis van Gaal's time with Holland, Memphis Depay, I know he can be a bit of a punchline for his club side, but he's been super useful and a consistent source of goals for them. And a guy who, I guess, similar to Son for South Korea, someone who can score goals out of nothing. And that's very useful to have on an international level. He is not expected to start, was the last thing I saw. And then we're looking at maybe Steven Bergwijn and Vincent Janssen up front. Maybe Cody Gakpo plays. I mean, it's it is a bit of a setback. And I still expect the Dutch to get it done. I think they got more quality across the board. But it makes it interesting for sure.
Are you familiar with the Dutch goalkeeper, Pasver? Because I don't know who he plays for or where he's from.
Yeah,
I mean, he's obviously from the Netherlands, but you know what I mean. It's a stupid thing to say.
I was about to say, where is this man from? Sorry, it's gonna take me a minute. Well, he's certainly not Senegalese.
Yes, no, we figured that out.
Sorry, that's tickled me. I'm a bit of a simpleton.
Well, he's clearly not a classically well-known Dutch goalkeeper in the common sense that somebody plays in one of the big 5 leagues or big 4 leagues.
So he plays for Ajax.
Okay. Well, then
they're pretty good.
He's an old guy. He's a late bloomer, which goalkeepers can be. Goalkeepers famously have a long shelf life, and he's a regular in goal for Ajax. But he's not considered a strength. Put it that way. I mean, I think there is a question mark on that position on the team. Yeah.
These are always so for me, this is a perfect example of a game that I love about the World Cup. Seeing an African team playing against a stereotypical great European side. The Dutch have been playing better of late. They haven't lost in 15 games. They've got a lot of talent. Again, if they're missing Memphis Depay, that does change things for them. But I'm assuming the Dutch are the favorites to win this game in terms of the betting books and all of that you pay attention to, Lars.
Significantly so. I'd be very surprised if in fact, I know they are. But I think in terms of things to look out for in this game, even if he's Dutch, I think a lot of people might not be very familiar with Cody Gakpo because he still plays in the Eredivisie. He plays for PSV. He was wanted by quite a few teams in the transfer window. A couple of teams in the Premier League had a good look at him. And he started the new season on fire. He's played 14 games for PSV so far with 9 goals and 12 assists, which I know sometimes with these numbers from the Eredivisie can be like dog ears, they don't always translate into the bigger leagues, but he's looked really, really, really good. And with Memphis being a doubt, possibly being out, the stage is set for young Cody Gakpo to do something tomorrow.
I fancy this Netherlands team in more than just being the top of this group. I really think they're a strong team. They don't have the internal issues that they've had in the past. They're deep, and if it wasn't for the fact that they were, if things play out as they should, that they will meet Argentina in the quarters, I think this team could go even deeper, and I think they'd have a good chance to beat Argentina. I mean, it'd be a good match if they meet in the quarters. So I don't think they'll have an issue with a Mane-less Senegal team tomorrow.
Do you think that knowing that Qatar is what it is, and after watching today's game, the two of them kind of go into this game just like easing their way into the tournament because they know that if they draw against each other, they're okay moving forward.
Yeah, it
against
doesn't eliminate them.
Right.
Yeah. No, but I think I don't think the Netherlands at least goes in expecting or being happy with
passive.
with a draw, or that they'd be content with a draw. I think they're going to go in for the 3 points. I think it's going to be Netherlands 2-0.
Okay. All right, Lars, you got a prediction to make on Senegal Netherlands?
I think the Dutch can get it done. I think 2-0 to Holland. I just think that the front line of Senegal are severely depleted, and the Dutch will secure that win.
Okay. I'll be the odd man and say the Dutch will at least give up a goal and win 2-1. All right. Now, before we finish up our debut wrap-up show of Qatar KickAround, it does behoove us to make sure everybody's aware of what our predictions were. And we used the tournament predictor platform inside FOTMob, which is by the way, a great website and a great app. And we're not partnering with them. We're not getting paid to say that. I actually truly believe it. And stats, the whole thing works very, very well. Well, they added a tournament predictor that results in this cool little radial graph of showing how your knockout rounds played out. And we've posted Andy, Lars, and myself's predictions on our website, thekickaround.com. And there's also a link. I don't think it's too late for you to join. We've got a whole bunch of people and listeners that have joined the group and made their own predictions, but ours are posted. Lars, you want to start with your predictions in terms of how the knockout round is going to go?
Well, I also just want to say I love the fact that you're flagging up FOTMob, because that, again, Norwegian app. Now, this, because listeners may or may not know, my country of birth is I'm from Norway originally. Earlier in the season, Pete flagged up the FC Quiz app as a good.
I play it every day.
Yeah, co-founded by my old boss, as it turns out. So independently of me, Peter discovered this on the internet, and now you're flagging. You just like Norwegian things, Peter.
I do.
Yeah.
But can I get a free trip there or something?
Absolutely not. But
okay.
Your enthusiasm has been noted. I don't know if you can go through the entire bracket. How should we do this?
Well, just talk about, start with talk about who you think the final four are, and maybe it's some interesting path for a team that ended up in your four.
Yeah, well, like almost every other person on earth, I think of predicting a Brazil-Argentina semifinal. I think that's a very common outcome in these brackets.
And before you move on with that, let's just repeat that is based on our assumption that Argentina and Brazil will both win their group, because there is no way for them to face each other in the final unless one of the two, Andy, end up somehow second in their group and then win their way to the final.
Then they would end up in separate parts of the bracket. Right?
Okay.
The other side.
Yeah,
okay.
I have Argentina knocking out France, and then knocking out the Dutch on their way to semifinal versus Brazil, who I believe Brazil on their path will knock out Portugal and Germany.
You still have France going through, even with the Benzema news that he is out of the tournament.
Yeah, in fact, I don't think that weakens them much at all. Now, that's not a diss to the current Ballon d'Or holder, who is an incredible player. But I think we see time and time again with World Cups that it's not just about the sum total of good players in your team. It's also about how they fit together. And I think Olivier Giroud is a much more logical foil for Kylian Mbappe in that team.
Okay. What else about your wheel? So you have Argentina going to the final again. Yeah. Did you talk about going against Spain? Did you say that? So
this is the thing. This is the thing that's exploded my mind, because I've written 14,000 words of preview material this week, and I've ended up with two teams in the other semifinal who I don't actually rate that highly. This is just when you go through all the teams and you look at strengths and weaknesses, and that's all good, but then you put it into the bracket and suddenly weird things come out. And I do have an England-Spain semifinal on the other side of it, in spite of not being that high on England or Spain. It's just the way it's worked out. I have England beating Ecuador. I'm assuming England win their group. I'm assuming Ecuador go through second in their group. That prediction's looking pretty good right now, at least. And then I've got England with a heavy heart. I've put England to beat Denmark in the quarterfinals, with all due apologies to my Danish almost brethren. And then I've got a semifinal between England and Spain, which I think Spain would win, putting them in the final against Argentina. Spain, who I think will knock out Belgium, and then they'll face Uruguay and win. it's pretty dicey. Could be Uruguay, but then Uruguay have a bunch of weaknesses as well. It's an odd one. I kept like double checking and checking my maths there, and it's just this is the way it's turned out, and there's very clearly a strong and a weak side of the draw. The way I think the group stage will turn out.
So if it makes you feel any better, Lars, all World Cup champions have had weaknesses, including the 1970 team that we consider the best ever. That Brazilian team couldn't defend worth the lick. One of the few teams that actually won a World Cup without having a good defense. So, whoever wins it, we're going to think, oh, they overcame whatever weakness. Now, I have a Final Four, a semifinal four, that mirrors exactly what you have, Lars. And for me, I have Spain, England, Argentina, and Brazil in the semis. For me, that Argentina-Netherlands quarterfinal match and the England-Denmark quarterfinal matches are. I'm not saying Argentina-Netherlands is a toss-up game, but if I wouldn't be surprised if the Dutch find a way to beat that Argentinian team, and I have Argentina winning the whole thing.
Yeah,
it's crazy. And again, Denmark, England. Man, if those Danes, and I'm going to segue to you, Peter, but man, if those Danes might not have it, might be that team, as you say, to go far. And now I'll segue it to you. Argentina, Spain in the final, and with Argentina beating Spain is what I have.
So my wheel is very similar to yours, with the only exception is that I have the Danes beating the English in the quarterfinal to make it to the semifinal against the Spanish, and Okay, we're just going to keep recording. I think this is working.
I got sound again.
Okay, good. Yeah, we're going to pick up. I think my camera's lost off of here, but that's fine. I'll pick up and edit.
What I was going to say about your pick, Peter, is I think it's a very brave but an astute gamble. And if you're a gambling man and you're in Vegas, it's not a bad, like just putting a little money, like a $10 bill on Denmark to go that far is not a bad pick.
I just like their balance. I like the fact that Eriksen's playing. I think that is, you think about storylines, a guy who literally died on the field last summer, coming back to make it to a World Cup final. Yes, but I just is a weird storyline. You can just see how scriptwriters in heaven put that kind of thing together.
It rivals the Messi raising the trophy.
Yes. So I do believe, I'm a big believer that this whole tournament is about the storybook ending of Messi lifting the trophy, and that's why look, my heart has Messi lifting the trophy. My head says Brazil wins that game and actually makes it to the final and wins, because it's been so long since Brazil's won the World Cup. It just feels like it's time for them to do it. But I really want Messi to lift the trophy.
Can I throw something in?
Of course.
So, because we've spent a lot of time together in the run-up to this tournament, we all have Denmark finishing top of that group, don't we, in our brackets?
Yeah. Over France, yes. I came very close to like picking France to not advance.
So I'm worrying that I've picked it, so clearly I like that theory, but I also wonder if we're succumbing to groupthink a little bit between the three of us. So at the end of the day, the French are a good team and they're favorites with the bookies to go through and all this. So with that in mind, if I'm wrong about that and France win their group, France get Mexico, which they would win, and then actually France bump into England.
Yeah.
Which again, I think the English would find a way of messing up. So then suddenly you've got France in the semifinal, in spite of actually not rating them that highly.
Now that is it. You believe France will go far? I mean, sure, France can go far, but
Well, that's the funny thing. We talk a lot about the French and how deep they are. They could field 2 World Cup teams that they're so deep, and now they're running out of first-line players because they've had so many injuries. We should, in theory, they could still be really good because they do have a lot of depth.
How are they in the room right now?
Well, this, and we talked about this. This totally has the 2002 vibe. Right after winning 98, and they dumped out of the group stage. And then when they made the final,
2010,
and
they made the final in six, but in 10.
and in 10 they dumped out in the group stage. And this totally has all
and
those
both
vibes.
times because of issues in the room.
Yeah,
same thing.
Yeah,
I just love sexy Olivier Giroud. I think it's great that nothing against Karim Benzema. He's a better footballer in almost every measurable way. He's a fantastic player. I just think having that target man who knows what he is and what he isn't, he knows a huge part of his job for being there is providing good service to Mbappe and Griezmann behind him. I think that creates a better balance up front, and I think that will make their whole attacking unit more efficient. And I think that's really interesting. And the suggestion now with Deschamps is that he's going to switch to a back 4, go away from a back 3. Now, the problem with that back 3 was always that they don't really have any good wing backs, so it never really made sense in that regard. Switching to a back 4, maybe getting Ousmane Dembélé in, who's kind of looked a bit spicy for Barcelona this autumn. Maybe we're writing them off a little bit too quickly. Maybe we were all sort of thought the same thoughts, and at the end of the day, there's some really good players in that team still.
Maybe, but I think by not doing that, at least from my perspective, by picking them second, I'm just highlighting that there are issues with the team. They could go and raise the trophy again, but it's just a way to show this team might have some weaknesses beyond what we see on paper.
And they have Tunisia and Australia in the rest of their group.
Yeah,
so the odds of them getting knocked out are just, that's the part that makes it difficult.
Exactly.
But what we can agree on is that whoever wins that group is such a big deal, right? Because whoever wins it,
they have a path.
Gets Mexico, and we know how that usually goes for the Mexicans in the last 16. There's a history there.
Yeah.
Whereas who comes second in that group almost certainly bump into Argentina,
right?
Which nobody wants to do in the first knockout game. So that is, that game between the two of them is going to be absolutely fascinating. Of course, Denmark having beaten France twice already this season. The form book is pointing one way. I'm just saying, I think it's quite remarkable, given how clear favorites France are with the betting odds and all of this, that all three of us are so solidly agreed that's going to be Denmark.
Well, let's also point out that all of us have the same quarterfinals, which all of these quarterfinals sound amazing. Spain, Uruguay, the Netherlands against Argentina, the Germans against Brazil, and the Danes versus England. Those would be amazing quarterfinal matches. That may be one of the best quarterfinal match setups in the tournament's history.
Yeah.
Would you agree, Andy?
Yeah, 06. I would say 06 was outstanding quarterfinal match setups. But yeah,
that's great. Okay. I think we've done enough for match day 1A. Would you agree, Andy and Lars?
Yes.
I love the fact that this third section ended up becoming longer than we had in mind. It's just because whenever we start talking about our picks, we can sit here all night, man.
We can and go round and round in circles.
Which is part of the beauty of the World Cup. Like, this is we can talk about it for so long. It's tremendous. Like, I gotta be honest, I'm still not really feeling this one because there's so much that's weird and different, but I am getting excited about the football that is to come. That part of it is building, I have to say.
That's what we're gonna focus on.
This is Andy and I's third World Cup to do some sort of coverage like this before. It's so fun. It's an honor to do it. We love doing it. Lars, having you part of the team is so kick-ass. We love having you, man. All of the listeners love you, and I'm looking forward to the next 25 shows we're about to do. So you're going to get a lot of us up in your face. Andy, can you handle it?
I'm good, man.
All right. Very
it's
good.
World Cup. So
you ready,
I'm
Lars?
good.
You ready for a nightly 10 p.m. start time, your time?
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, you think it sounds like a lot, but I mean, I bother you on the WhatsApp constantly when I'm watching football anyway, so we might as well do it with voice and video and with an audience. Why not?
Very good. All right, we will be back tomorrow, 4 p.m. on the live stream. The podcast will get posted straight after that. A big day tomorrow, USA versus Wales. Thank you for listening. We love and adore you. We'll be back tomorrow. Go on out there, get stuck in, and win your 50s.